Delegates, following that rousal, I now ask our new Deputy General Secretary, Derek Mullen, to second the annual report. Hard act to follow.
As the man said, follow that. Good morning, delegates. It's good afternoon indeed. It's my distinct honour and pride to stand before you today as Deputy General Secretary of the CPSU. It is the single biggest honour of my working career. I've worked for this union almost 20 years, and it's the single biggest honour, and I thank you for your trust this morning and your ratification. It's an honour to second the annual report in this a historic year, at the time of the defeat of the Croke Park 2 proposals by an overwhelming majority of public service unions. For the first time ever, colleagues, a national agreement has been overturned because members of this union and colleague unions decided enough was enough. And to quote our campaign slogan, and indeed our campaign slogan, which was adopted by unions up and down the country, we have nothing more to give. What was in this agreement that we rejected? When is a pay cut not a pay cut, colleagues? When they increase your working hours 13 days a year, which equates to a 6% pay cut, and if you couldn't work those additional hours, they take that 6% straight off your salary. If you had family responsibilities, that was a particular concern. Those additional hours were planned to be banked to replace overtime, but union members said no, they were not prepared to take that course. Any overtime that was left would be paid only after they trashed the overtime rates that we had fought for hard over years in collective bargaining. Union members again said no, particularly those who depend on overtime and those who have absolutely no choice but to work overtime. They proposed to adjust your increments, described as modest by some, but certainly not modest if you're on low to middle income. They would then retain the new increment date following 15-month increments and continue to account a saving on your back year on year till you retire, but union members said no. If you were on the top of the scale, they caught you with a contribution of 6 days leave or equivalent cash amounts. If you faced redeployment, and many of our members do, you could have faced lengthy moves despite their insistence that 45 kilometres was still the order of the day. What they didn't tell you was that this did not take account of where you live. And shamefully, an official from the government side at the negotiations said to us, it's none of our business where people live. Therefore, faced with an unacceptable commute, members would be bounced into a disciplinary process, at the end of which was a redundancy package. And they called that voluntary, not in our view. We called it tantamount to constructive redundancy and possibly dismissal. We'll fiercely resist, colleagues, any attempt by government to impose such draconian terms on our members. And indeed, we rejected Taoiseach's threats this week on compulsory redundancy. Shame on you, Enda Kenny. And here's the thing, never forget it was government decisions that put jobs into locations around the country, and the consequences of that in a reducing public service must be fair treatment for all. They said to you, moving on, they said to you that flexi time was protected following negotiation. Our belief is it wasn't. They got a lot of what they wanted, but they didn't get it all. And I believe they constructed a template that had the capability of removing much of the working flexibility so vital to workers who are strapped for time and already struggling to match work and family commitments. Colleagues, it is very clear from our negotiations with government that they were intent on deconstructing the ways in which we work, arguably for no financial saving, and in a manner which would have driven members from work in the public services. We will not accept it. Combined with a more restrictive work-sharing regime, colleagues, there can be absolutely no doubt as to their intent to drive a stake through the vital terms and conditions so important to our members, particularly in these difficult times. These are the reasons we left the talks at the Labour Relations Commission, and we make no apologies for it. We would do the same tomorrow if faced with similar attacks on the hard-working lives of public servants. Gone are the days you might feel apologetic for your public sector job. Stand up and be proud of the job that you deliver in this state. This country, colleagues, has been ruined by pinstripe crooks peddling billions at our expense. The greatest sleight of hand of all time was their ability to turn a banking crisis into a public service crisis, and in doing so deliver years of unworkable austerity onto the backs of the unemployed and workers in Ireland and everywhere else. Any decent society can and should be measured by the strength and contribution of its public services. Within our own services, the delivery of sustainable government can only be achieved through a permanent and supportive civil and public service. The collection of revenue, I used to work there, to support this is proudly carried out by our own members. The delivery of social protection in the most difficult of times by our members on the front line, who provide a lifeboat of sorts to those who have suffered so much in recent years. The administration of justice, agriculture, communications, transport, and so much more is also vital in any modern society. The health of the nation, the education of our children, the protection of our streets, the provision of local services. These are all key demands in any nation state, and they are a key component of the future success of this country. And we will not stand idly by as government or other powerful forces in this state try to bring those to their knees in what they consider to be best practice or world class in the wider economy. We will not stand for it, colleagues. For all these reasons, we will not support a revisiting or a tweaking or a clarification of the LRC proposals. They were ill-judged proposals and were a bad deal for public servants and a bad deal for the country. And we will fight any attempt to legislate for changes in terms and conditions which will challenge hard-fought rights of collective bargaining that the people we have spoken about this morning and that Owen has referenced died for over 100 years ago in this country. We will not accept it. Nor can we support the further attack on income and services after years of levies and cuts which see our members and other workers bringing home 20% less in take-home pay. Nor will we accept a set of proposals designed to divide and conquer public servants and their unions. It will be a bad day for the trade union movement when one section of workers in its union think it a good deal to vote in favour of something because they feel they are escaping lightly, but at the expense of other groups of workers, we take such a course at our peril. Whatever happened to the principle, one for all and all for one? A principle so important in this centenary anniversary of the Great Lockout. Up and down this country, we see failed businesses, failed local economies, destroyed by successive government policy, stripping your spending power, the spending power of ordinary workers at an enormous price to guarantee failed banks and to ensure bondholders are paid. When will they learn the lesson of all this madness? When will they begin to take decisions that have a positive impact for citizens, rather than the incessant support of financial markets, who seem to know the price of everything but the value of nothing. Trading in money as a commodity does not and will never add value to this world. But trading in goods and services will do so, and in Ireland supporting that through good public services is the only sustainable route. This requires a new deal, a real new deal, which will allow for effective stimulus, will put people back to work, will stem the shameful tide of emigration and create the sort of country we can be proud of. That's what we seek. You cannot achieve this through further cuts and austerity, and we must see a more realistic approach to taxation in Ireland, which must include a third tax rate for top income earners and a tax on top-end capital and financial assets. Public servants will continue to play their part as they have in appropriate transformation of the services we deliver up and down the country. What we won't stand for, though, is the lowest common denominator attitude that prevails in government and elsewhere, which seeks to provide services at the lowest cost and through an outsourcing of functions in some cases. This union will fight outsourcing in every way that it can. The recent decision of the Civil Service Arbitration Board to allow the outsourcing of call centre work related to the local property tax is a direct threat to the services we provide, and shamefully has resulted in an important function transferring to a private sector company, a company that responds to public inquiries by reading a frequently answered questions document prepared by the Revenue Commissioners. Don't ask them a complicated question, though, because they just won't be able to answer you, and they'll refer you straight back to the experts in revenue. Both Des Fagan and Paul McSweeney fought a strong rearguard action at arbitration to stop this, but to no avail. Shame on the government. Importantly, though, there's a clue in this decision as to the government's thinking. Why have currently serving civil servants who no longer have a job in their department not been afforded the right to carry out this work? Precisely, I believe, because the government and senior management and public expenditure do not want them. If they did, they'd be working in a revenue call centre today. Other outsourcing propositions are also floating around government circles, and we've already made it clear that we'll oppose any effort to outsource payroll if that were to come to pass, or indeed social protections plan to outsource elements of work activation, wait for this, on the basis of a finder's fee for chasing the unemployed off the live register. Internally, we have cooperated with the successful development of the HR shared service, and we see no reason as to why payroll cannot continue to be delivered by our members in the future. On other matters of business at General Council, we have encountered difficulties on a range of fronts, including the release of a new career break circular that contains unacceptable return to work clauses, something my colleague Teresa Dwyer will speak to in her equality report later on. Other motions from our conference last year also failed to find acceptance from the employer side at the General Council because, wait for it, they were cost increasing. They never changed the script. It's important to point out that we are also awaiting an arbitration hearing on the question of compensation for the loss of bank time, and also to deal with other outstanding leave claims, including the reduction in marriage leave, a claim for additional leave, we're very optimistic, and the restoration of leave lost by FOSS members on joining DSP. In seconding the annual report today, it is a distinct honour, as I said at the outset. I would like to take the opportunity to commend the General Secretary for all his work, most particularly in delivering on his commitments in the communications area. It is fair to say that members are better briefed than they ever were. Considerable improvements on the website and a major revamp is also in the planning. And Owen has mentioned the establishment of the Membership Information Unit under Cliona McNamara and with Dennis Keane and Mary Murtagh. Something I also want to say this morning in recognising Owen's hard work for the union and acknowledging his steely commitment to the membership, particularly through difficult times at the LRC, but at a time when his father was gravely ill. It must have been very difficult for him. Sean Ronayne has passed away since. May he rest in peace. Nearly done, President. In the wider semi-state area, we continue to face significant threats on a range of fronts. Eircom still labours through difficult times and is a prime example of a badly managed privatised company. The challenges loom large for my colleague Des Fagan, who continues to fight the good fight for members in that company. In An Post, we face the prospect of the sale of another very important strategic asset, the National Lottery. Another example of poor government thinking on the overall economic front. The sort of privatisation will not serve the country's interests at this time. In the museums and other cultural institutes, we have some of our lowest paid members. They would have suffered harshly under the LRC proposals, particularly in relation to the overtime elements, and they've no option but to do overtime. We'll continue to fight to improve their circumstances. And I'd also like to acknowledge the recent result achieved by Kevin Cochran at the LRC on behalf of members in the museum for compensation for toil in relation to nighttime security. Delegates, the strength of this union is in its membership, and let no one tell you differently. This year, we went back to basics. We defended the rights of members countrywide against the backdrop of enormous government and trade union pressure to stay at talks. We took an honest decision, and we will continue to campaign to protect the members' interests on every front. We will also continue to work with those unions who co-joined us in the alliance against these cuts that we face down. I thank the head office staff, without whom our labours would be impossible. And I would also like to thank partnership officials Maura Haslam and Deirdre Nihill for their invaluable role. In conclusion, I salute the members, the activists, the executive committee, and all other national committees for the role they played. It was so important, colleagues. I particularly took heart this year meeting the Youth Committee. Their vibrancy and commitment is palpable, and they are the future of this organisation. Now is a time for unity of purpose in this union, a time for real issues to come to the fore, for faction fighting and division to be buried forever at every level. We have a united union. Let us show that in every action we take. Delegates, I second the annual report.
Thank you, Derek.